Foreign interests are trying to interfere in this country in a big way. In our elections, in our marketplace, they're trying to turn us against each other. That is known. That is intelligence data that's known. Well, if they're trying to do that and we're not cleaning up the laws to protect ourselves of who's even representing them, shame on us.
Wouldn't it be something if every former member of Congress cared as much about ethics as this one? If they did, we wouldn't be talking about all the Congress members turned foreign agents.
One of the most basic principles of our Constitution is that no foreign country should be allowed to interfere with the elections of we the people. Yet for some reason, that seems to make no sense. Congress allows those same foreign countries to interfere with American policies, the kind of things that affect our day-to-day lives.
I want to take you on a roller coaster of a journey over the past year that's uncovered some stuff in Washington nobody's really talking about. It started when I discovered the blueprint that countries like Russia, Turkey, and China, whose priorities are often at odds with our own, were using to get their way in Washington. Their secret weapon? Former members of Congress, more than 50 of them, who have parlayed their elected positions into high-paying jobs peddling foreign influence.
Here's how it works. Step 1. Start with a country that wants something, anything from America, like Saudi Arabia, seeking to maintain the flow of American aid and arms amid controversy.
Saudi Arabia is a really tough ally in terms of human rights.
Mohammed bin Salman may have hacked Washington Post owner and Amazon founder Jeff Bezos' phone.
He's gone full gangster.
Ordering the murder of a U.S. resident, Jamal Khashoggi.
Funding extremist mosques in Europe.
There is no due process.
You could be detained for years and they don't even tell you what your crime is.
Step 2. Find former members of Congress who don't go back to their home districts. Instead, go looking for high-paying lobbying gigs in D.C. Saudi Arabia hired 5 of them in the last few years, including longtime California Congressman Buck McKeon. Step 3. Pay him. McKeon got $50,000 a month from Saudi Arabia, including a $450,000 payment just 3 days after the Saudi-sponsored killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. In the last 3 years, McKeon's lobbied at least 27 members of Congress on behalf of the kingdom. Among his priorities, block a U.S. withdrawal of troops in the region, and get a House bill passed that could initiate sanctions on Saudi enemies. Step 4. Grease the wheels. The Saudis aren't allowed to send cash to members of Congress, but the American lobbyists they're paying can, and that's just what McKeon did, writing campaign checks to at least 14 of the 27 members he was trying to sway. Then, Step 5. Results. Most of the senators McKeon lobbied supported the Saudis, and on the House side, he scored a victory when South Carolina Congressman Joe Wilson signed on to sponsor the bill just 5 days after his meeting with McKeon. Back office influence that affects billions of tax dollars, and sometimes enormous amounts of our troops as well.
Most of the former members of Congress we reached out to ignored us, so our journey was guided by Foreign Agents Registration Act filings. The law, known as FARA, was written nearly a century ago to stop Nazis from influencing our politics. And while it doesn't really prevent foreign influence in America anymore, it does at least require lobbyists to disclose it. Those leads led us to Capitol Hill, with a slight detour through Southern California, Buck McKeon's old district.
I stumbled upon VFW Post 6885 on the drive between Los Angeles and Edwards Air Force Base.
I'm Lori Riggin.
Pamela Bernardi. My first husband was in the Korean War.
My dad was in the military for 25 years.
My stepdad was a radio man on a submarine.
I'm so proud of my family that have been in the service. I couldn't tell you how much I look up to my dad.
It's the kind of place
we've known each other for 37 years.
It's where everyone trades war stories because they're all connected to the military.
We had to be friends because there was nothing much out here.
They served, or their family members served, or they know somebody serving now. So foreign policy is domestic policy to communities like this. And instability abroad means instability at home.
It scares the hell out of me. I've got great grandkids. So does she. Yeah. And to think, what's the world going to be like?
For more than 2 decades, this community trusted McKeon to look out for their interests. But when he left Congress in 2014, at age 76, he started a new career, working for foreign interests, including Saudi Arabia. And while some lobbyists put distance between themselves and the Crown Prince after Khashoggi's 2018 murder, not McKeon. He stayed close to the kingdom, accepting his biggest single check from the Saudis, nearly $500,000, just 3 days after the CIA says the Crown Prince ordered the killing of the American journalist.
Why wasn't that prosecuted?
It's totally legal in America.
then somebody needs to change the laws.
That would be Congress, who doesn't agree on much these days, except that they like being able to collect foreign paychecks after leaving office. In fact, we found plenty of Democrats and Republicans cashing in since 2015, including 5 lobbying for Saudi Arabia, 3 for Russian interests, and 5 for the Chinese.
But no country has built an army of former Congress members like Turkey. In recent years, as it's grown closer to Russia and more distant from the U.S., the nation and groups linked to it have hired 12 former American lawmakers to influence policy in Congress and the White House and keep hundreds of millions of American dollars flowing their way. That includes former Florida Democrat Robert Wexler. He and his firm, owned by one of President Trump's top fundraisers, were retained after a Turkish national bank was caught allegedly laundering billions of dollars to Iran, a U.S. adversary. Wexler and his boss got meetings with members of Congress, the State Department, and White House on their behalf, part of a successful effort to stave off sanctions throughout 2018. They also defended Turkey during a time it was defying U.S. warnings on purchasing rockets from Russia. In 2019, the U.S. gave Turkey another gift, control of Syria, following the controversial withdrawal of American troops there.
This is a brave new world, but we don't have the current statutes in the law to keep people from taking advantage of us.
Former Tennessee Rep. Zach Wamp barely takes a breath when talking about the need for reform in D.C., including on the Foreign Agents Registration Act.
You're representing a foreign interest with our government. Well, if it's not for a really good cause, it shouldn't be done. If it is for a really good cause, okay, here are the rules. All right, thanks, ladies.
The former Republican leader now works as a consultant for D.C. nonprofit Issue 1. They're on a mission to curb money's influence on politics, and that includes all of his former colleagues on both sides of the aisle who take paychecks from foreign interests. Wamp says it doesn't just impact our tax dollars, immigration policies, and trade regulations. He also mentioned potential concerns about national security and espionage.
It's sloppy, sloppy, sloppy. It's not our best self. The laws we have on the books today on lobbying and foreign lobbying. We have to redo it and update it in the modern era where we have these new threats. If they're going to play in our election space, then we got to make sure that they don't play with our representatives.
There could be even more than those 50-plus former members collecting foreign paychecks, but it's impossible to know because enforcement of the Foreign Agents Registration Act has been so bad over the years. Watchdogs believe that many lobbyists just ignore it. In fact, when the president's former campaign chair, Paul Manafort, was arrested and convicted on FARA violations, it was almost as surprising that the feds were actually enforcing the law than it was that the president's former advisor was doing work on the side for the Ukrainian government.
And when American lobbyists do disclose a foreign relationship, they aren't always the most forthcoming. See, FARA relies on the honor of each lobbyist to disclose where his or her money is coming from and what those foreign interests are getting for that cash. It's clear, after going through hundreds of these things, not everyone wants us to know what they're doing behind closed doors in Washington. Ukraine is a great example. Hunter Biden wasn't the only American with a White House connection collecting $50,000 a month for his services. In 2018, a group of Ukrainian steel companies started paying $70,000 a month to the lobbying firm owned by Bob Livingston, a former Louisiana congressman who's made tens of millions of dollars lobbying Washington since resigning his seat in scandal in 1998. What did those companies get for their $70,000 a month? Livingston's disclosures aren't particularly detailed, but they do reveal he was pushing Ukrainian interests with the Secretary of State, the Senate President, the Vice President, and President Trump's then Chief of Staff, John Kelly. One of Livingston's asks, revealed through impeachment testimony, he wanted the removal of U.S. Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, who was pushing for Ukraine to crack down on political and corporate corruption. Livingston has denied his calls to remove the ambassador were on behalf of the steel companies that he was getting paid nearly $1 million a year to represent.
The reason that foreign interests spend so much lobbying is because it works. I'm Brendan Fisher, the director of the Federal Reform Program at Campaign Legal Center.
This watchdog's concern about Congress members cashing in?
Ultimately, we should expect that U.S. policy is being shaped in the interests of U.S. voters and U.S. citizens, not based on which foreign interest is spending the most lobbying.
Check out the eye-popping totals spent by certain countries to grease wheels in Washington, and that's just since 2017. And the Campaign Legal Center, along with the Daily Beast, recently revealed how Congress members weren't just converting their former constituents' trust into a lucrative new business, but they were doing it with their money too. Instead of returning unused campaign cash to their original donors or charity when they left office, as the FEC suggests, 9 of the lawmakers turned lobbyists kept their campaigns active, even though their campaigning days were long over. So those dollars you donated to improve our country may actually be helping other nations and the political mercenaries they're able to hire from Congress.
This system as it currently exists is out of whack, and it has the effect of warping our democratic processes.
This is bad. It erodes the trust the people deserve to have. This government only works where we can have confidence in our elected representatives.
The bipartisan problems are not without possible bipartisan fixes. One proposed lobbying overhaul even got staunch conservative Ted Cruz and far-left liberal Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to team up. But like most legislation that proposes reform in D.C., the bills are all wasting away, lacking support in the Senate, and in some cases, the House too. A fix will require members of Congress to swear off their lucrative futures in favor of their current constituents. And that's never been an easy sell in Washington.
Listen to the people that voted for you. They're doing exactly what they want to do. So that's my
because
biggest...
they are there not for the money now. The paycheck is what's important anymore. It's a shame.
None of the former Congress members we mentioned in this story agreed to an interview, but some other former lawmakers turned foreign agents did, telling us they were genuinely proud to represent specific international issues and that fair disclosures ensure transparency. Still, the majority of the 50+ we identified ignored our outreach. Former Florida Congressman Connie Mack, who's represented Sri Lankan and Hungarian interests, wrote in an email, the only thing he'd like to add about his lobbying is that, quote, he's really good at it. Smiley face.